right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, I have with me Noah Evan, and I'm really excited for this interview. So, thank you, Noah, for being here and coming on and willing to have an open conversation about all things podcast and sex.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so maybe what we'll start off with. So, you have a podcast yourself called Severely Personal, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit. So, what is it about? What are the things you talk about? And how did you kind of get into that?
I love that question because literally I had been wanting to do a podcast for years. Like I literally bought all the equipment and everything that I wanted to do for the podcast like 4 or 5 years ago. But the number one thing that I could not figure out was what the name of the podcast I want. Like I couldn't figure out what I wanted to name the podcast.
Mhm.
And so I just really never was like, okay, well, it'll come to me at some point. And then I just started seeing like all these people doing it. And I'm like, damn, like I like, I don't know, like I have a loud mouth and I want to
Mhm.
say something. So it eventually just came to me and I was like, oh, severely personal. And basically, like what we talk about on severely personal are like all things personal. So it can be like people shitting themselves, like sexual things, like trauma, like all things that are like deeply personal. I love to interview people, but at the same time, I just want it to be really fun. Like I love
Mhm.
to just talk things with this sense of humor, and I think it's so much easier to learn when there is like humor in every situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, right? Because then it feels lighter and it doesn't feel like
Yeah,
something super heavy. And even in situations or things that are heavier conversations, it's like if you can make something light about it, it just feels like it takes away, the weight of what you're talking about. And you can joke around with it. And then people
exactly.
tune in and people listen more. And then people can kind of start to put together the pieces of how that like relates to them in their life, right?
Right. And it's just is so relieving just being able to laugh and share trauma with
Hmm.
people, like because so many people relate but like don't talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Right. Because it's such a taboo topic, no different than sex and,
Hmm.
all of
Right.
those things. It's like so taboo to, openly have a conversation about those things. So that's amazing that you guys are doing that. And I love that. So do you guys talk then a lot about sex and, just your sexuality and your journey with it? Or is that kind of something not as,
um
discussed?
I just had an episode where we talked about a bunch of like different people's like hookup stories. I have this reoccurring segment where there was this guy that I initiated where we were like gonna hook up. It was such an embarrassing situation, but I referred to him as like Fat Cock Atlanta. And he's from Atlanta,
Hmm.
but he's moving to where I live in Florida now, and so we just keep having like random like encounters, and that has been like a reoccurring segment. And he
I
gets
take
his
it he
nickname
has a
from
fat cock.
he yeah.
Yeah.
When I tell you enormous, yeah, yeah,
Really? Okay,
yeah.
so then I have to ask now because I want to know. So, with Mr. Fat Cock Atlanta, are you the top or are you the bottom?
So we never actually ended up having sex because our very first time we were drinking, and then I think we were even like smoking too. But like right before it was time for me to start giving head, I literally passed out. I passed out on this man's stomach and fell asleep. And I was knocked out for like an hour.
Oh, wow.
So nothing has ever happened. I'm not sure if it ever will, but I would be the bottom, which scares me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scares probably most girls for, front door access, back door access. I don't really know if that's something that's all that I wouldn't be willing to do that. Let's just say that. But I mean,
It's a
different
lot of prep
experiences.
work.
You know what? I've heard that there's a lot of prep work that goes into anal, and especially for like talking to, straight men in the gay porn industry or, the gay guy that I talked to that was in the porn industry. And they were telling me about the stretching before and the numbing cream that goes in before and sits and all of these things. And then I'm thinking, I was like, but that's not what heterosexual people do. It's like a guy will be like, I want anal. And it's like, slap some lube on it. And like, you're sitting there deep breathing. And I'm thinking, we're doing it wrong. Because like anal is never pleasurable for me, for most of my friends. They're like, no, you really gotta ease into it. They're like, only if I'm super
Yeah,
fucked up. Or and I'm thinking, okay, so you guys acknowledge the fact that there's prep work that goes into this and like
for
time
sure.
and space, and like we're over here, the men over here are just be like, what do you mean, like let me just spit on it and slide it in. So I don't know, I think they could all take a lesson.
I mean, I've definitely had like my encounters where there wasn't prep work and then
Hmm.
shit gets messy, literally. I've also had situations where like it wasn't and it just involved a lot of lube.
Okay. Okay. Something to learn for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know. I mean, I hope that you guys get to have that encounter. I hope you get to experience that. And then I hope you can share that with me about how that
Yeah.
went.
It's
Like,
it's funny though because like most people when they see me, when they meet me, they think of me as like a bottom because, you know, I'm a short guy. I have a beautiful like porn star asshole. Like I have a bubble butt. Like I am the cliche bottom. But in all my relationships, I've always been the top and I haven't successfully bottomed until 4 or 5 months ago with my last ex.
okay, so why were you always the top then? What was like that predetermined or
Sexually, I feel like a top. I mean, I do desire to like bottom, but I've just always like every partner I've ever been with, they've just had more of a bottom energy. And some of them have tried to like top me before, but it was always just too painful. No one ever did it right until like my last partner. I was just like I told them to keep putting on lube until it didn't hurt,
Mhm.
and then it just felt good.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah, it's all about communication.
Yeah, for sure. I could understand. I could see that, right? And you have to be very comfortable, I think, with the person that you're kind of trying something new with for the first time. If, like, say, that is like the experience you're doing for the first time. But how old were you when you came out? How did that look for you for being able to express that in a way where you felt safe and comfortable?
Yeah, so I actually still have not come out to my family. We don't really have like a relationship like that. Everything is surface level. Like they live in another state. Like we had a very traumatic upbringing. It was a very abusive household. So I've never really had like that feeling to want to come out. But when I came out to my
Hmm.
friends and everyone else in my life, that was probably around high school, like maybe my sophomore year. I first came out as just like demisexual, which that is when you only like have a sexual attraction to people like after having an emotional connection, which sometimes I still experience, but definitely much more like sexually free now. But then I was just like, you know what? I'm just fucking gay, like towards the end of my high school journey. So I was probably like 17 or
Hmm.
18. I think what made it so easy for me is that I had friends that were gay or bi
Okay.
or like queer identifying first because if they weren't in my life, I don't know if I would have come out. Also, social media played a huge role in it and seeing like YouTubers, like the generation of
Right.
Tyler Oakley and all of them.
Okay. I could understand. I could see that, right? It definitely, if you're surrounded by a good, strong network of people, it doesn't feel as lonely to kind of be able to
Right.
talk about it, to voice that, right? So, have you
Mhm.
ever been with a woman?
And like when I was in middle school, just like young school relationships, kind of, I
Hmm.
love the idea of being with a woman. I love like my emotional like friendships with like my girlfriends, but I'm just sexually not attracted. And it's so
Okay.
unfortunate because like I don't want to be with men. Like, ew, like men suck, men are gross. But unfortunately, they do turn me on.
Fair. I guess you're attracted to what you're attracted to, and you can't really help it, right?
Right,
And
right.
then it kind of
It's not fun. Yeah, it's
yeah.
all psychological. Like it's not fun, but you know what? We have to make the best of it. And I'm sure I'll find a non-gross, icky man eventually.
Okay, so being somebody who does prefer, men and you're that's the space that you live in and the community you're part of, do you find it then very hard to date, to find good partners? Because I mean, I know we find it really hard to find good partners. And I'm not going to lie, I always thought that maybe it was a little bit easier for, men and women in the community. I know you guys have your own struggles with different things, but I thought maybe just in that space it was just so much more accepting, because people, once you're free in that way, wouldn't have the same type of
Yeah.
struggle that we do.
It's like this shared experience of like trauma and
Mhm.
like potentially being hate crimes and like that sort of vulnerability that I think someone can like really see another person on the same level with. Gay people can be just as fucking toxic as straight people, just as ignorant, just as manipulative. My last relationship was so healthy. Like it was literally like picture perfect. It was written in a book, like it was perfect. But funny enough, they were actually non-binary, so they didn't even go by he him. So non-binary is like if you feel like you either float in between like the
Yeah.
female and the male binary, or you just don't relate to it at all and you're just separated from it.
Okay, interesting. So does that affect anything to do with, say, your sex life or the way that you guys interact in that when people identify as different, you know?
Not really, because that was one thing that kind of like really taught me a lot about my sexuality and like
Mhm.
that maybe I could potentially like be with a woman, was because that I never ended up seeing them as like a gender that I thought I was attracted to. I was just simply attracted to them.
Okay. I could see that, I guess that makes sense. Do you find it like, I have to ask because I find it confusing with some of the terms or the preferences of what, people either identify as or prefer to be called. Do you find it like confusing yourself being in the community in that space to even try to keep up
Yes,
with it?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really confusing. I think for me, like, especially because I had never been with a partner who had they them pronouns before. So at first it
Mhm.
was hard. Like I instinctively wanted to refer to them as he, him. But I
Mhm.
had to get myself out of that habit. And I think when people see that you're trying, they're gonna be
Mhm.
forgiving and they're not gonna like I think whenever you're just making mistakes over and over again and you're clearly not trying, that's when like
Mhm.
there's going to be upset and like tension. But it got so much to where I have been referring to so many people as they them, that now when I meet someone who is like he him or like she her, like I'll accidentally refer to them as they, or like I just did, I'll refer
Yeah.
to like him as they. Like so it's really confusing, but I think it's just
Ouch.
patience.
Yeah, for sure. I could see that. So I know for myself that dealing with, talking about sex and sexuality and all of those things, how taboo and how stigma, how much stigma there is around it. And I've kind of always felt that, like, say for men and women to talk about, their sexuality and the things that they're into, people judge it, and it's like nobody wants to hear about it, and they think that like it's weird for you to talk about these things, and it's weird to have kinks, and it's weird to have fetishes. And I've kind of always felt that in, the space of, for men and women who are part of the LGBTQ community, sex was almost viewed as more fluid, and it was almost kind of more
Hmm.
assumed that you guys are more fluid with your sexuality, and those things were more accepted and they're not as judged. Like, if I tell my friends that me and, or tell somebody, me and my straight friends had a sex party over the weekend and everybody came over dressed up, brought like their favorite toy, and we all, took turns or shared this, they would look at me like, what the fuck is wrong with you and your friends? Like, you know what I mean? But if
Uh-huh.
you, told somebody that like you and your friends did that, they'd be like, oh, that sounds amazing and that sounds fun. Like, it's almost like it's expected
Yeah.
for you guys to, express your sexuality in a very out there way. But then for us to do it, it's just like, the fuck kind of weird shit goes on at your house? My kids cannot play with your kids. Like,
For sure. I mean, I think there's two like factors. And one specifically is that our sexuality has been at the forefront of our identity. You know, like
mhm,
people already know that, like me, I'm a man having sex with another person who's probably a man. That's already there, and it's already talked about because our sexuality is what has been shamed. So there's kind of already like a acknowledgement of it. And
Mhm.
I think the other main key, I don't know if this is the same experience for like lesbians or queer women. I think a lot of it also has to do specifically with the gay male community because we're also men, and it's way more acceptable for men to have sex and be more raunchy than like women
Mhm.
are.
Yeah, I guess I could see that, right? A little bit. It's interesting
Hmm.
though how that judgment is already there for men and women in depending on what it is that they already identify, that people have accepted that they identify. And it's just
Uh-huh.
like, okay, yeah, no big deal,
Right.
right? But do you experience, I guess, do you ever feel like you're put in a position still where you're feeling, judgment or you're feeling the shame and the stigmas?
I I definitely have like, I know when to talk about these things and like what kind of
Mhm.
groups I can talk about. Like, obviously, I would never bring up sex in like a work situation, but like all my friends are queer. Like, I don't think I have any straight friends. That's not true. I do.
Really?
I have a few. I have a few. Yeah, it's weird because even some of my friends who like were initially straight have now come out as like gay or just like somewhere on the spectrum. But
Yeah.
yeah, my friend, like all my friends groups and everything, like we're all like very open about like our sexual beings or horniness.
Okay, so then, okay, since you brought up the horniness, I have to ask, do you think that gay men are more horny than, say, straight men?
Yeah. No. Yes, I think it's a tie. I think I think gay men have more kinks because there's more like taboo, and that taboo
Mhm.
creates a lot of kinks. But I think they're just as horny. I think maybe gay men might have more sex just because it is consensual. I know a lot of people who don't want to have sex with straight men for like good reasons, but I think for the
Fair.
most part, I think it would be a tie.
So, like, in an ideal world, in your mind, how many times a week would you be having sex? Or I guess, how many times a week are you having sex as a, you know?
It's so weird because I genuinely am not. I mean, I masturbate. I love to masturbate, but I'm single right now. I am
Mhm.
not I am not into the hookup kind of culture. It kind of freaks me out. I have a lot of like physical trauma with stuff like
Mhm.
that. So there's an idea like in my brain, I'm like, "Oh yeah, it would be hot to like have sex with random people like 3 times a week, maybe, but I would never actually do it just because I have a lot of anxiety and it kinda, like, scares me, like, I wanna know who I'm having sex with, but I think, like, cruising, I think that, like, the idea of that is so hot, like, so many of these things, but they're all just, like, fantasy things, and I don't think I would ever actually, like, go forth with them.
Ah,
In the
okay.
last month, I've had
That's
sex
fair.
0 times because I am getting over a breakup.
Okay, so you're waiting, you're doing the work, you're healing before kind of getting out there.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, it's, I guess, no different than us. See, I mean, well, I think a lot of me and my friends, it's like our journey used to, and getting a little bit better of healing involved a lot of casual sex, right? It's just like you just think you're gonna essentially fuck the pain out of like your brain and then you'll forget about them and you'll move on and you'll be happy. But typically that's
Right.
not how it works. And it usually ends up causing a little bit
Yeah.
more pain along the way, right?
I definitely felt the urge to do that, but I also the area that I live in, there's not that many cute gay people, I should say, or gay people who I would be willing to be naked around.
So down in Florida, that's where you live. Do you find that you guys have a lot of events and a lot of, clubs and stuff that you can kind of go to and where you're, surrounded by that, I guess that network of people that everybody kind of has that same open mind and, their sexuality is something that they are easily, it's easy to express and everybody's accepting of
Uh-huh.
one another in that way.
Yeah, so it's funny because I grew up in North Florida, which is a very conservative area. There was not that
Mhm.
many gay people, not that many gay people, like, when I got out of high school. I moved to Miami, like, 2 years ago. I lived there for a year, and it was so gay. A lot of, like, there's just gay people everywhere in Miami. Less like an open community where it was more just like you have to be pretty, you have to show up with like a hot body, like a lot of expectations to just like be hot and horny and ready to fuck. And that's not
Mhm.
unfortunately, like, I think that is wonderful. I think that is a great thing to happen, but I don't feel comfortable in that environment. And so it never really felt warming and welcoming to me. I moved back to North Florida, that's where I'm living now,
Mhm.
and I started getting involved with like on Facebook, I found there's a queer market, and I started going that and meeting a bunch of people there who are queer, and LGBT, and it has been way more welcoming for what I want because it's more just like showing up and just being alive versus like being hot and sexy and like looking for sex.
Mhm. Okay. So big change then, and obviously a place then that you found you were able to kind of just be more of yourself.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
hard to find a community within a community where people really do feel like it allows them to just be their authentic, their version of themselves, and you don't have to hide, and you don't have to, put on a certain type of a face and, be a certain way to feel accepted, right? So it makes a huge
Right.
difference, I think.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, especially for, like, people who have families who are not, like, accepting and they just need it. Because a lot of gay people, LGBT people, have a chosen family because most of our families don't approve, and it's like, well, we can find what our blood family is supposed to do through
Mhm.
chosen family.
Right. Yeah. That's a big thing that people don't realize that, sometimes your blood family isn't exactly who you don't have to feel obligated for them to be in your life. And, you know, I think essentially people really should have more chosen family of the people who allow them to kind of be themselves, and where it carries over into all aspects of your life, right? Especially when you're going through a healing journey, if you're dealing with traumas and you're trying to embrace who you are in all forms, you need to have that support system around for sure.
For sure, yes.
Yeah. So kind of want to talk a little more nitty gritty, some, sex conversation. So what would you say has been your best or most memorable sexual experience that you've had?
Oh, gosh, that's such a hard question. Okay, I'm gonna
Right?
go with I would say probably when I successfully bottomed, because like, I just remember because that first one, like, they put it in, like, it hurt. I was like, "Ooh," and I
Mm-hmm.
I I really wanted to do it because, like, I think bottoming is just hot, like, the act of just the thought of it and, like, being, like, submissive and vulnerable in that kinda way is,
Mm-hmm.
like, really hot. So I really wanted to do it, and it hurt so much before just 'cause I'm just so tight. I was just like, "More lube, more lube, more lube," and then
Mm-hmm.
it eventually, like, started feeling good, and I just remember being like, "Oh, thank you, God, like, I can finally enjoy this."
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So when you talked before and you said about prep work, because I have girlfriends and they live by this saying that, you know, if you're gonna play in mud, you gotta expect to get dirty. Because I mean, let's be honest, there is obviously, some men out there where it's like, oh God, if like, no, gross. Like I don't want to do anal. I don't want somebody to shit on my dick. And then there's like the guys who it's just like, well, it happens and you just don't say anything and you just clean yourself off and like,
Yeah.
whatever. And then I've had some guys who like keep asking for, to do anal. And I'm like, right. I was like, but like, I like you have to understand, like, okay, like, well, if it gets messy, like, has that ever happened to you? They're like, God, no, that's never happened. That'd be gross. How do you come back from that? I'm like, great. So you're already giving me the anxiety that if something happened and you get shit on your dick, then you're basically telling me you could never look at me the same. And that'll totally ruin our sexual relationship. Why would I want
Right.
to do that with you then? Like there has to be some level of awareness of thought that like if you are going to be playing, in the back door, it might happen that that is going to be there
Mhm.
and you have to just accept it. So is that like a conversation you guys have prior, or like where's that lie? Because obviously you that is how most gay men have sex, obviously. So there has to be obviously
Mhm.
some sort of level already of conversation or acknowledgement that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think I have never in any of my ever relationships have, like, said at the beginning of the day, like, "We're gonna have sex later tonight." I've never have necessarily, like, planned, like, a sexual thing, it just ends up happening,
Hmm.
but I know a lot of partners who, like I mean, but it's also, like, if we have, like, Mexican that day, we just subconsciously know to not do anal, so that is relevant too. But for people who like do plan their hookup experience, they'll say like, "Hey, like let's have sex tonight," and then both parties know to just kind of like watch what they eat. Obviously, don't get Chipotle. Some men are into douching. I wipe my ass. I make sure there's no shit in my ass. I've never shit on a dick. I've had shit on my dick before, and yeah, I mean, yeah. Is it gross to look at? Yeah, but you just wipe it off, and I think for like men, it's like where else are we gonna do it? You know, like it's either the
Hmm.
mouth. So there's that thing where it's like, okay, I'll just get over it. But yeah, I think like for straight men, it's like so what? Like, yeah, what did you think was gonna happen? You thought it was gonna be like a
Hmm.
barren fields? Like, so yeah, I think people who are scared of that, there's douching involved that is like
Okay.
really helpful for a lot of people. But yeah, I think
Does
men just
it
need to get over it.
like because I would like be more fearful that it's like, okay, if you're doing an anal douche, you're putting a whole lot of liquid up in that area. And as much as what I understand that, like, yes, everything essentially comes out kind of before you start playing in that area. I mean, isn't there kind of then too? It's like you've maybe loosened things up in a little bit more of a way and you run the risk of something kind of coming out during sex, or is there like a time frame where it's like you anal douche first thing in the morning and then you have all day to kind of like clear out the area before you start to play?
I think when it comes to douching, like once all like the liquid comes out, like I would never have sex like immediately, like right after it. Like typically just douche like the hour before it happens. But you can successfully do it like 30 minutes before and like all the liquid will come out. It's not that bad to have moisture in your ass because like unlike a vagina, like your asshole is not self-lubricating, so you do
Mhm.
need moisture and lube and everything to make it feel good because if anal's not feeling good then you should not be doing it. I don't really think there's necessarily like a time period and what comes out very quickly out of your asshole after
Okay.
you do so you don't really have to like wait on like a certain time length.
Okay. So it is kind of more something to like use kind of right beforehand.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Some people use it throughout the day too. Like they'll do it in the like. There are so many people who are just super cautious about it and like don't want to deal
Yeah.
with shit that they'll just do it throughout the day.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like I want to try it. I'd love to be able to be this person who is like, yeah, you want to do, absolutely no problem. But I think just like that ultimate fear of like, I just don't know that I'm willing to like risk that, especially with somebody who's also very like, yeah, that's gross. Like it has to be somebody who's like, hey, you know what?
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
you. Don't worry. You shit on my dick, I'll still love you.
It definitely needs to be someone who you trust and like is
Hmm.
a a lot of men like want to try it. Also, a lot of men want to also be like a lot of straight men enjoy being fucked by their girlfriends and like getting their ass ate and fingered. Like a lot of men enjoy that. Like especially because men have a G spot like in their
Hmm.
asshole. You can make a man come just by sticking your finger in his asshole and like tickling that G spot. Like, but there's a lot of taboo around it, and men don't want to be gay, so they don't do anything like that. But if you don't want to enjoy sex, then that's your loss.
Yeah, it's so true, right? Like I've actually a lot of guys I've seen like online that are straight guys kind of talk more about like the pegging and like wanting to try it and
Mhm.
or I have some straight friends who have, bought, you know, butt plugs and stuff to try at home when they're masturbating on their own and things like that and they're like, "Ah, I
Yeah.
kind of liked it." And some of them are like, "I didn't like it at all." But it's almost like, men are almost kind of hitting that point of maybe exploring a little bit more for themselves. They're seeing all
Yeah.
this stuff out there, they're hearing all these things, and they're like, okay, well, wait, maybe I can open up my, what I'm into. Why don't I just try this? And they try it, I think, kind of almost by themselves a little bit secretly, and then it's just like, hey, I think I kind of like that. Why don't we try that together? But don't look at me weird, right?
Right, and for me, like, I don't enjoy I don't enjoy masturbating anal play, like, I don't find pleasure in myself when I, like, am to finger or use, like, a dildo or plug, like, I don't that doesn't pleasure me. I only enjoy anal when, like, someone is giving it to
Hmm.
me, like yeah.
I love like finding out all the, inner secrets, nitty-gritty details of what people are doing behind closed doors. I don't know why I've always had like this like curious kind of nature of like, what
Yeah.
do you do in the bedroom? How do you have sex? What toys do you use? What works for you? Right? Yeah.
I love it, yeah.
I think it's like one of those things where it's like so many people think that talking about sex and sexuality is so taboo, but that's almost what makes it so much more interesting is to like actually have
Uh-huh.
those conversations with people and help them kind of get out of their shells of expressing. And once they meet somebody that's so open to talk about it, and almost kind of gives them permission to enjoy it and to realize that they can have these conversations, and it's not as taboo because everybody's doing it. Everybody enjoys sex,
Mhm.
everybody enjoys an orgasm, so why not share, right?
And it's funny because, like, I'm a gay man. I had and so I don't know anything about, like, vaginas or anything about that, but I had a girlfriend come up to me recently, and she was talking about how, like, she could not come from penetration, and she like, the only time she ever comes is when she masturbates, and I was like, "Well, like, are you coming from, like, rubbing your clit?" And she's like,
Hmm.
"Yeah," and I'm like, "Well, tell whoever's fucking you that you also want them to, like, rub your clit, like, you deserve to come, like, you shouldn't not be coming," and,
Hmm.
like, she never thought about that, and here I am just, like, a gay man giving a straight woman advice on, like, how to come with her partners.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's crazy that she wouldn't be able to advocate or communicate that for herself, right? But people get
Yeah,
so scared to like speak up and say what they need, right? That's the biggest
right.
thing is just like if I tell them what I want, if I tell them what I need, or I tell them what's not working for me, like what will they think? Will they get in their head? It's like a whole thing. It's a whole mental thing, right?
Yeah, I think people just need to be more like, when I'm having sex, I want my partner to be having just as much fun as I am, so, like,
Mhm.
I always ask questions. I'm like, I'll literally be like, "Can I eat your ass?" Like, because sometimes they're not in the mood to, and then
Mhm.
it's like, "Okay, well, let's do something else because I also want you to be enjoying it." So I think it's just all about communicating and asking, "Does this feel right? Do you like it when I do this?" Like, because you wanna have the best sex possible, right? So why not
Yeah.
learn in the process of doing it?
No, it's so true, right? I think that's the one thing too is like obviously based off of, the differences of, heterosexual sex based versus, bisexual, gay sex, lesbian sex, because there is so much more, like you said, prep work and stuff that goes into it. I think there is naturally almost more communication and foreplay, and the experience is naturally longer, and people expect to kind of be there a little bit longer and spend more time doing these things compared to
Mhm.
your very typical, guy girl 2-minute quickie in and out, right? Like that's kind of almost what like the norm has become for probably most, couples these days is that quick
Yeah.
interaction. Whereas that doesn't work for obviously two women, and that doesn't work obviously for two men to be together because most women take anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes to reach, full orgasm. So you have two females who understand the female body playing together doing that. They know that already. They already know that this
Mhm.
is like an experience and time put into it. And then for, two men, you guys obviously know that there's prep work that has to go into it for you guys. And this isn't like a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, 2 minutes in and out. Not saying it can't be, and there's not a time and place for that. But typically, the experience isn't going to be some 4 minute
Yeah.
experience that you guys are having. Whereas in, heterosexual relationships, unfortunately, that's a lot of the sex that some of these men and women are having. And women just end up being going like, okay, well, whatever, I'll finish myself off later. Right.
Especially like cuz we don't have sex education like courses anymore. So like a lot of the stuff that like most people see when they're learning about sex is through porn, and
Mm-hmm.
porn is already just a huge facade. So yeah, that's a really good point. I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, I definitely think when same sex couples are having sex, like there's a better understanding of each other's bodies and like what's needed.
Totally. Right. I don't know. All these straight men need to go to like a camp or a course put on by like, a gay man or a queer man who's like, listen,
Yep. Yep.
like, and just like vice versa. Like, yeah, there needs to be some cross education happening so that everybody is
Uh-huh.
actually satisfied and enjoying their sex lives.
Yeah, like I tell people all the time, like if you're not enjoying sex, then like and if you're not enjoying who you're having sex with, then you need to not be having sex with them. Like,
Hmm.
don't ever make yourself do something that you're not enjoying. Like, don't do it for someone else. Sex is like one of the few times we get to be selfish in life. Like, it's supposed to feel good
Right?
sexually. Like, you want to come. Like, be as selfish as possible. But I mean, also be like respectful to your other party.
Yeah, absolutely. And as people should be for sure. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, it doesn't seem to always happen. There is a huge thing to be said about that, about the person you actually are connecting with, sharing that time with. It's an exchange of energy. That's literally what sex is. It's a sexual exchange. And you have to make sure that the people that you are allowing into, your space and essentially giving your body to and having those experiences with are people who actually respect what it is you need. And so then you're respecting what they need and you have that communication, right? And then you learn. And I find like once you've built that trust, that's when kind of the curiosity of other things of what you want to try kind of comes out together, of the different kinks, of the different fetishes, because you have that foundation of trust that you've already built. And then it's just like everything from there just kind of grows and it adds on different layers of like your sex life, which is the best part. That's exactly what, everybody wants to achieve. They want to have those type of experiences.
And when you
So
have like
for
successful
you,
sex with someone, like you just are more excited for it next time versus like if you didn't enjoy it, you're not going to want to have sex with that person again, or you're just always going to dread it. And like a lot of people will experience like libidos from bad sex, like it just
mhm.
traumatize them.
Yeah, it's so true, right? One bad experience can kind of ruin so many different things, whether it's your sex
Hmm.
drive or your willingness to be open to other things. It really, you can shut down. And it is almost like a trauma. You have a bad sexual experience or a bad experience with, say, like a certain toy or somebody did something or said something. It's almost triggering to a trauma. And then it
Hmm.
really does kind of ruin it, moving forward. And then you close down and you're less likely to try something different or be more open, and it is just like a shutdown instantly.
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. No, I'm so like grateful that you came on and had this conversation and we're able to share. I'm excited to listen to your podcast. So that's kind of fun. I'm going to check that out. For everybody listening though, where can they find you if they want to look you up? Your socials, we'll put all the info in there for them to find it, but just quickly for everybody that is listening, where can they best reach out to you or find you?
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. You guys can find me anywhere on social media: Instagram, TikTok at severely personal. That username everywhere. If you have questions, if you like want to like message me, like DM me on Instagram, and then like on all streaming platforms, severely personal. You'll find it.
Awesome. That's amazing. So, do you have kind of like a guest application stuff that like people if they want to come on and they want to share their experiences or talk about different traumas or just things going on, is that something that is accessible for your podcast?
Yeah, I'm always down to like talk to people. Just like DM me, contact me, like let me learn about you. Like, yeah.
Awesome. I love that. And I think I love that for people who I think people have experiences or things that they've gone through and they don't really have an outlet or a community or people that they want to share it with. So it's kind of nice when there is different, podcasts and avenues or communities or groups that people can kind of, touch base and get to share their story, right?
For sure. It's so important to be heard, to feel
Mhm.
heard even, and to feel seen, because there's just so much going on in the world constantly, that
Mhm.
it's really easy to feel, and
Right.
so ignored and not like sufficient. So being able to hear other people's stories and their experiences and being able to relate to that is just so humanizing, and so
Right.
important to the human experience.
1000%. I couldn't agree with you more. That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And for everybody listening, definitely go check him out. Go check out his podcast, Severely Personal, and follow him on Instagram.